Notre Dame fans, welcome to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. My name is Brian Driscoll. You guys know me. That is Ryan Roberts. You guys know him too. And we're here to talk about the pending commitment of Devan Houstan, a talented four-star defensive lineman from Maryland, originally from Canada. We'll be deciding today between Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, and others. We will carry that live, and that will be on the other side of a commercial break. So, Ryan, this is a big one for Notre Dame, obviously. They're trying to put together a really special defensive line class in 2023. And from the beginning of the staff taking over, this is a kid that was part of that desired elite class. And Notre Dame is we're going to talk about kind of how the recruitment went down after his decision. But this is one where the staff has really put in a lot of work, and it's going to be evidence of this staff's ability to kind of play from behind sometimes and ideally try to make a commitment or get a picket.
Yeah, no, I think that Devan's a really important commitment as well, potentially for Notre Dame, because you already have the defensive ends obviously on board. You have Kian Kelly, who projects the Viper. You have Brendan Vernon, who could be a strong side defensive end, could eventually turn into a three-tech in this defense. And you also have Boubacar Traore, who's a very similar player also in that vein that he could be a strong side end or he could be a full-time three-tech.
Right, let's go to it, Ryan.
Joining us on HQ
Can everybody hear?
Official, already smiling ear to ear. And
can y'all hear?
Can't imagine the emotion right now. First and foremost, congratulations on all the hard work it's taken to get to this very moment. But before we put it on tape, give us an idea of what this recruitment has been like for you.
This recruitment has been nothing short of a blessing for me. Just being able to be in the position that I'm in is truly a blessing. And if you told me probably, I think, 9 or 10 months ago that I was going to be in this position, I'd look at you like you had 5 heads. Just how fast this recruitment process has gone by and honestly how fast it all came into play. It's been truly a blessing. Yeah.
Well, it is one that you have earned, and all of those schools behind you are waiting for me to get out of the way. So let's do it right now. The wait is finally over. The floor is yours, fella. Let the folks know where you're going to be playing with your college ball.
All right. Well, first off, I want to thank my brother. Just honestly, he showed me what it's like to work hard and really chase after your dreams. I also want to thank my parents, my mom and my dad, just for always supporting me. My dad going to the field with me every single day, working out with me, and just honestly pushing me to be the best person on and off the field I physically can be. And as well as my trainers, Coach Ken and Coach Alvin, you guys have really shown me what it's like to work hard and push me every day to be a better person and a better man off the field. As well as Coach Rutt, I want to thank you for taking a chance on me and really letting me come to St. James and really letting me flourish and taking a chance on me to be a better man and all that. And as well as Coach D and Mr. Tucker and all the St. James family just for welcoming me into the school as if it was my own home, as well as just my friends and family. And lastly, Tonka and Kyle for telling me about St. James and putting me really on the map, kind of helping me get to the States and really do my thing. But with that being said, I'll be committing to the University of Notre Dame.
There it is.
There it is. It's We Are ND for Devan Houstan. Congratulations, my man. An exciting moment and a decision that I'm sure came with a lot of thought. And I want you to take me through that process a little bit. What about Coach Freeman's program made ND feel like the right place for you?
I definitely just say the family feel. Coach Freeman, before he even got the head coaching spot, me and him both just had a great connection. And when he got that head coaching spot, he still kept the love the same. And honestly, just what he's doing over there is so special, in my opinion. And just how he's able to bring all these amazing players together to play on one team is truly something special. So that's definitely the reason why.
Well, you get to be a part of something special now as you head to Notre Dame, a special place to play your Saturdays, and that is the top recruiting class in the country that you're joining right now. But I'd be remiss if I did not ask. This is now a house divided. Notre Dame, Michigan, a rivalry I grew up within. I know what that means to both of those fan bases. Did you chop it up with Big Bro? Did you get the blessing? How did that all go down?
I mean, my brother personally, he wasn't really swaying me to go either way. He just wanted me to go out happy. And he mainly just said, go where your heart feels and go where you'll make some noise and stuff like that. So that's what helped me get to Notre Dame. And he doesn't really care. I don't think he doesn't care about the rivalry, but he's more happy that I'm happy. So yeah,
it's a beautiful thing to have not only this commitment in line, but to have the support of your brother. It's so great to see, a testament to your parents as well, who have gotten you both to this point. But your accolades on the field are met by those off of it. I mean, how much did Notre Dame's winning culture in the classroom factor into your decision ultimately?
Oh, it was a huge factor. I mean, they always talk about 4 for 40, and I'm looking in the long run because I know football is only going to last me so long. So I mean, any way that I can be in the best position possible after football, it was really what I was looking for, and Notre Dame definitely fit that. So that was definitely part of my reason as well.
Well, as someone who grew up Saturdays going to Notre Dame games at Notre Dame Stadium, I could tell you, I could speak for the faithful right now that they're jacked up to have you as a part of this class. But you have the eyes and the ears right now of the Irish faithful. Let them know what sort of ball players heading to town.
I think they're getting a really smart ball player. I mean, a really smart guy, very energetic. I don't shut up when I'm on the field. Very positive guy and just a hard worker. I mean, I love to get after it. I love to win. I hate losing. And yeah, just a great teammate, great person, great leader, great player.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing you make some noise in South Bend in the years to come, fella. Congratulations again from us at CBS.
Thank you so much.
There it is, Ryan.
There it
Notre
is.
Dame has landed Devan Houstan. That is a big one, literally and figuratively, Ryan. Let's first talk about a little background. I think first of all, I want to talk about what he just said. I think he speaks to what we have been saying for a while. You know, he talked about even before he became the head coach, the relationship he had with Marcus Freeman, right? We're used to hearing that, right? But he made a comment. He made two comments that really stuck. Number one, obviously, the 4 for 40 thing, the academic piece, when you sell it right, is a huge part of this, right? It is such an important thing. That doesn't surprise us. But it does. Look, there are talented players that are big-time players with big-time offers that care about that kind of stuff, as we're seeing. The other comment he made, he talked about the talent that Marcus Freeman is bringing in. And as we've talked about this over and over and over, when you start getting these big-time players in a class, it only makes it easier and easier and easier to add the rest, because in football, more than any other sport, in my opinion, top players want to play with other top players. And Devan Houstan just said it right there. I mean, even before the academic piece, he had to be asked about that. And as kid goes to St. James. If you know anything about St. James, that's a really good, small, private school. You look at his background, his brother's background. Obviously, academics are very important to him. His brother's a basketball player at Michigan, by the way, which there is no rivalry in basketball between Michigan and Notre Dame that I'm aware of. But the fact that he talked about at the very beginning, the relationship, then the fact that there's other big-time players that are already in this class. These kids see that. Other kids see that. And again, it's going to have an impact as they look to try to fill out this class.
Well, I mean, I think you hear me talk about just the game of football a little bit in general, that it's such a momentum-built sport, right? Like, I mean, literally one good play can just transpire into a series of good plays, and that could be the difference in a football game. And I think that it's the same on the recruiting trail. You know, it's a avalanche effect. People have been asking us about when the avalanche kind of starts, when the snowball starts. And I think that you're seeing it. I think that you are seeing when you're on a good groove and you have relentless recruiters, the momentum is still going to carry. It's going to keep building. And this is obviously not going to be the last commitment that we see on the defensive side of football this cycle, in the class in general, maybe not even on the defensive line. So this was a big, big moment for Notre Dame. I know, Brian, before, we had to obviously flip switch real quick to get there. I would argue that this one is maybe the biggest left on the defensive line. And that's no disrespect to Jason Moore, because I think that he's the difference between a really good class and an elite class. But what I mean by that is a practical approach, because I mentioned before, you have Brendan Vernon and Boubacar Traore. One of those guys is going to fit long-term, most likely at strong side defensive end. The other one's going to be more of a 3-tech player inside. And you have Kian Kelly, who's the true viper of the group. But we have seen that there's still Notre Dame needs to get a little bigger on the inside. And although the nose position in this defense isn't one that you need to be 300 plus pounds necessarily, you still needed a true nose in this class. Because could Brendan Vernon be that eventually? Maybe, but that's still a lot of projection obviously attached to that one. I know that Devan Houstan is going to be able to carry enough weight where he's going to be 295, 300 pounds with maintaining that athleticism. So this is a really big one for Notre Dame. There's no question about it.
I get where you're coming from, Ryan, as far as the biggest, and I accept it from the standpoint of this is big because the biggest need. I think this is the biggest D-line commitment left from a need standpoint. I still think anytime you can land a player's elite, and this is not you are not pushing back on this because you and I both agree that Jason Moore's a top 50 player. But this is like you said, this is the guy that filled a need, a biggest need, and that is a guy that can play the nose. And we'll dive into the film here in a little bit when we break down Devan's game. We'll kind of talk about what we like and what we see and all those type of things, and we'll get into that here in a few. But yes, in this defense, he's a nose. I'll say this, and I'm curious if you agree with me on this. And we'll see this more when we look at the film. He's a 3 technique in most defenses that are geared towards gap control and having guys that can play that position. I think he fits the nose in what Notre Dame tries to do, but I don't think he's pigeonholed into the nose at all. I mean, there's other things he could do. But to your point, I think he's a nose first, then it can be a 3. And in high school, he plays 5 technique. I mean, and there's a play where he does a really nice inside spin move to get to the quarterback. So I think he's a nose because he fits what they want out of that position, size, power, penetrating ability to close in a football. But he's not a nose in that he can't play something else. And I think that only adds to the value of landing a kid like Devan Houstan at this point in time in this recruiting class.
And I would love to get your perspective on this, Brian, because I know we have guys, Notre Dame has guys like Howard Cross, obviously, Jacob Lacey, that can play the nose, and they're a little bit of smaller guys, and they have penetration ability, obviously, because of the quick first step. But that penetration ability is more as a run defender, right? Like I think Devan Houstan, with the length that he has now, that's going to be able to play nose. He gives you some upside, I think, as a pass rusher from that position that doesn't usually have pass rushing ability. So I think that's the difference, and I don't want to call it an upgrade, but it's just going to be a different stylistic approach to playing the nose tackle position. I think Devan's going to be able to give you potential to not only impact the run game, which a nose needs to do, but also have that penetration ability and have pass rush potential too from that position.
I'm smiling because I like the fact when we're on the same page. Here's what I wrote. I just published this literally as you were talking. Here's what I wrote in my class impact and my commit profile. Right now, he's an even better pass rusher than a run defender. But with continued enhancement from a technical and consistency standpoint, I see Houstan developing into an impact run defender at the next level as well, one making plays in the backfield. I actually think yes, you are correct. I think he right now is a better pass rusher than he is even a run defender right now. Yep. Which again, in the run defending aspect, there's just some technical things as a junior in high school I want to see him improve upon. And from what I understand, he's still pretty new to football. He hasn't been playing football a long time. His family moved from Canada. So, there's some things to work on there, but the natural potential is there for him to be a really good run defender. But as of right now, he's a better pass rusher. I mean, he played 8 games last year. They play a private school league in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. They only played 8 games as a team, so he played all 8 games. He had 15.5 tackles for loss. He had 7.5 sacks last year, and he plays offensive line, which we're going to watch some offensive line film as we go through this as well, because there's one particular game, like one of those, those game highlights that they show that they'll have like on Huddle. There's one where he's playing. It's a couple minute long, just a game clip, highlight clip, and you see him making some blocks that kind of show some impressive ability from him. So I agree with you, Ryan. That's one of the things I really like about this kid is I think what do we talk about? If you can rush the quarterback right up the middle, you can be really good. And now you have a nose tackle that I believe can bring pass rushing ability to the table. And he's 6'5", and he doesn't have the length of the other guys in the class, but it's still above average. I mean, to me, his length is still above average. And then when you put that on top of a 6'5" player, like we talk about, height doesn't matter when it comes to engaging a blocker. Right? It's the length that matters. Where height does matter, and this impacts Notre Dame, is when you're trying to fill a pass lane and the quarterback's throwing the ball, right? Because if my shoulders are already 3 inches ahead, if I'm 6'5" and my shoulders are 3 inches ahead of yours, right? You're going to need to have more than 3 inches of length on me to be more impactful there. And that's where I think he adds something as well from a disruption standpoint. And so, again, this is a really big pickup. Let's dive into a little bit of the backstory of this recruitment first, and because I want to share with people. First of all, Devan Houstan committed to Notre Dame a few weeks ago. So this is a kid that's been in the class a little while. And it was a really, really interesting recruitment because He was the guy that they offered last October. His brother, as they talked about, Caleb Houstan, was a 5-star recruit. He played at Monteverde Academy, which is it's like a even better version of IMG for basketball down there, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. They had like 9 Division I kids on their team a couple years ago, including like Cade Cunningham and Caleb Houstan and some other guys. There was a kid that signed with Michigan, Zeb Jackson, who was a backup at Monteverde a couple years ago. It's really insane. And that's where his brother went. His brother went to Michigan. And I love the fact he's like, yeah, my brother doesn't care. It's like he's a basketball player. He's not there because he loves Michigan. He's there because he thinks Juwan Howard's going to get him into the lottery. That's why he went to Michigan,
Sure.
So I thought that was interesting. But Notre Dame offered him last October. Mike Elston had developed a really good relationship with Caleb, like really strong relationship. And before Mike Elston left, we thought Notre Dame was in a pretty good standing with Caleb, where I really thought if they weren't the team to beat, they were at least emerging as a potential team to beat. Visited in January on the weekend of the 29th. And obviously Mike Elston left at one point in time, and Notre Dame kind of fell behind a little bit because you're starting from scratch. Then there's a period of time where Mike Elston leaves and you don't have a D-line coach. Al Washington comes in. He's kind of starting from scratch. They weren't recruiting this kid at Ohio State, which, I think is a mistake, but we can get into that a whole nother day. But he didn't have, and Al Washington was a coaching linebacker, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. So he comes in, there's no relationship there. His brother's at Michigan. Then Mike Elston leaves for Michigan, who had built that relationship, and Michigan became the team to beat at that time. Notre Dame just kept chipping away pretty early on. Al Washington got on him pretty quickly and just started chipping away and chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. And here's the crazy thing. He hasn't been back on campus since January, I don't believe. And so they were able to beat Michigan for him despite not getting him back on campus. He's been to Michigan since Mike Elston went to Michigan because there's a picture of them standing together at Michigan. So Notre Dame was still able to beat Michigan for Devan, despite the fact that since the changeover happened, he hasn't been back to campus since January. Really, truly impressive job. And it was Al Washington, it was Marcus Freeman, it was Chad Bowden, it was the staff has done a great job. And as always, it's a teamwork thing with the staff. But Al Washington deserves a lot of credit for this. This is now he's now kind of taking the lead in the new coach commit race. You know what I mean? Like he's got now, 2 really talented players on the board. Obviously, he got, played a big role in getting Boubacar Traore. Now Devan Houstan to add to what was already an excellent foundation that he inherited with Kian Kelly and Brendan Vernon. So that's a little bit of a backstory to that recruitment. And then, of course, you commits the weekend of Mother's Day and all that kind of stuff. So this is a big one, and this is why we have said for a while that we felt Notre Dame was in the driver's seat because he was one of the silent commits that we were aware of. So big pickup for Al Washington, and he's pretty quickly proving to be an incredible force on the recruiting trail so far.
Yeah, no, it's really impressive what they have done as a staff with this recruitment. I mean, like you said, the fact that he got back to Michigan, his brother is a Michigan student, and Coach Elston left from Notre Dame to the University of Michigan. When you cycle those together and you, again, like you said, hasn't been back to Notre Dame since January, you would think that that Michigan would have been in the driving seat, which it seemed like they were. I mean, after that visit, after that visit, I was a little worried, to be honest with you. I felt good about everything that they were, doing with Devan up until that point. But the fact that was the school that he went back and visited, he has some ties to him. And I think it speaks volumes, the fact that Notre Dame was able to destroy that momentum from the Michigan side of things, despite not getting back on campus. So, yeah, I want to give Al Washington a huge shout out here because 3 out of the last 4 commitments are from him, right? Brandon Davis Swain.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him. I forgot about the
Pendleton.
2024 kid. Yeah.
Yep. Boubacar Traore, and now, of course, we have Devan Houstan.
Sam Pendleton being the only exception. I think that's something too because a buddy of mine texted me earlier today, and he said, I think Coach Washington gets it. You have to dominate. You have to dominate in the trenches. And I think there's teams that we've seen. Clemson won 2 titles without dominating the trenches on both sides of the ball. They dominated on the trenches on one side of the ball, but not both. But I think Notre Dame is unique in that Notre Dame is never going to be able to out-athlete the best teams. They can stack up athletically, right? And we've seen them do that, but they're never going to have the depth of just elite athletes. They have to be able to neutralize that in the trenches. And that's the thing that's hurt them against Georgia and Alabama in their matchups against Georgia and Alabama is they could not beat those teams in the trenches. And I mean, they could like in 2020, I think when I look at the matchup, I feel like Notre Dame was able to stalemate Alabama on both sides of the ball. Like the Lions did some good things. I mean, Notre Dame ran for, it was about 140 yards in the first half against Alabama. Or, I mean, the defensive line actually played pretty well. If you go back and watch the film, the D line more than held their own against Bama. Did the same thing in 2012. The problem is that they're not able to win in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and that's where they got to get to. And so when you talk about the last 4 commitments coming from linemen, 3 on defense, 1 on offense, there's another top Notre Dame target who's a lineman that's going to be making his decision next Friday. It's clear that that Marcus Freeman and his staff understand that, look, we've got to not just be good here, we've got to dominate here. And the level of talent that Notre Dame has added to the defensive line since Marcus Freeman arrived, because we're excited about the 2023 class, but let's not forget they got a kid named Tyson Ford and a kid named Aiden Gobira that showed up already, who are really good football players. And it just shows that that like you said, Coach Freeman gets it. And that's a big thing. Big thing.
Well, can you imagine in a couple of years, Brian? Because I think the one thing that you talk about at the University of Georgia is, Jordan Davis went 14th overall or 13th overall pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. He didn't play a majority of the snaps, right? Like, you take him off the field, here comes this other great player. I think, do you remember Julian Rochester, who was like a pretty good recruit?
Yeah.
And he's a relegated backup on Georgia this past year, right? And Jalen Carter and Trevon Walker and Adam Anderson before his incident and Nolan Smith. Like, they just have guys that they just throw out there. In a couple years, in theory, you're going to have guys like Gobira and Keeley, and they're going to come out of the game. Well, maybe you still have Brendan Vernon out there, right, if they're mixing in particular spots, and there's going to be waves of defensive linemen. I think that's where the best teams are built. When Alabama has been at its absolute best, they just had waves of dudes. They just waves of them up front. Same thing with Georgia. Georgia this past year, the biggest thing about Georgia was, yes, all really good football players, there's no doubt, but they just had so many of them. It's the depth piece to everything, and this defensive line in a couple years is going to be scary for Notre Dame.
Especially if they're still able to add Jason Moore to this mix, which they're trying to do. And there's really 1 D lineman left on the board. We'll talk about that here down in a little bit part of the show. But I think our guy K Grant loved the super chat. Thank you so much for that. Shopping down a different aisle indeed. # Freeman. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Then here's something else to observe about this defensive line class that they're putting together, not just this year, but last year. And we've talked about this a bunch, right? They are focusing not just on athleticism and talent, but size. And that's the thing is, like, you watch Devan Houstan, we'll dive into the film here in a minute, but the kid can move, but he's big. He's 6'4 plus. He listed at 6'5", 270. He told me he's 275. But the thing you got to understand, he plays basketball. He plays basketball at St. James. And if you watch his basketball clips, Ryan asked me what did I think of him. I don't think, have you watched him since we talked? I doubt it. It wasn't that long ago.
Not yet.
But it's like, you see his nimbleness. He's got some skill. There's a play where he's kind of driving and he kind of throws a backdoor cut. But I said he plays basketball like a nose guard. He's just a big physical kid, you know what I mean? But you can see the footwork, right? Once he stops playing basketball again, you're going to see 15, 20 pounds going on like that. And he's going to be a 6'4.5", 6'5", 290 plus guy pretty early in his career with long arms and quickness and power. Brendan Vernon's already up probably over 275. Kian Kelly's up to 240. Boubacar Traore's 6'4 plus 255. He's got a great frame. Jason Moore's 6'6", 260. Tyson Ford 6'4.5", 265 already. Aiden Gobira's 6'6", 230 already, and skinny. Like, they're adding an exceptional length, not just size. And I think that is so important in today's game. And then you look at Alabama and all those edge guys they have, they're all like 6'4 plus with long arms, right? And that's what Clemson has been doing to teams for years. And Notre Dame is doing that now. And this combination of Marcus Freeman and now Washington so far has been impressive when it comes to putting really talented defensive linemen together. Because here's the thing. This is the lowest ranked kid they've landed so far. He's the number 192 in the player in the country. He's the fourth lowest. He's of 4 defensive linemen. He's the lowest ranked. He's number 192 in the country. He's a top 200 recruit. 2 of the services have him in the 180s. And Rivals doesn't have him ranked in the top 250, which is silly. But the other 2 have him in the 180s. So This is a big time pickup, Ryan. And in any way that you look at it, any way you evaluate it, this is a big one for Notre Dame.
And I know people always ask us about Harry Houstan, jumping over the other side of the ball, his ideology to take mostly tackles at the high school level, move them into inside players, interior players. Well, we're seeing that in this cycle right now on the defensive line, Brian. Like, all these kids play defensive end at their high school. Like, we're not seeing any of these players that play majority in the interior. And it's about projecting those traits. I mean, Devan Houstan, I think that on a lot of programs across the country, could probably play strong side defensive end. He could probably play strong side defensive end at a pinch at Notre Dame. But the fact of the matter is he's going to go from a flexible enough athlete outside, good enough quickness outside, to being a plus player in both those marks on the interior, which I wouldn't be surprised if Devan Houstan, despite, like you said, being the 4th ranked player on the defensive line in this class, if he comes in and he plays a little bit as a freshman because he has interior rush potential from the nose, like, that's going to be valuable for him.
Right. Right. I don't view any of these guys as 5-year players. None of them so far. And there's nothing wrong. Like Aiden Goldbyron, I could see as a 5-year guy just because he's got so much physical development that's needed. But like Tyson Ford and the 4 kids they have now they're not 5-year players in my opinion. Barring injury, needing a medical year, they're not 5-year guys. And as Sid Irish pointed out, your D line, this class is 6'6", 6'5", 6'4", and 6'5". And the guy that's 6'4" has an 80-inch wingspan. So that's Boubacar Traore. So certainly adding a great deal of size. ABC, I love this. ABC, I'm just going to say ABC Def. I know it's DEF. That's great. Congrats to Devin and his family. Thank you for the super chat. Very, very, very much. Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you for the super chat. Michigan fans checking into the ER. Go Irish. I think that's the final piece. Obviously, it's always nice to go beat Michigan for a recruit. There's no doubt about it. And I'm not going to lie. I have nothing but respect for Mike Elston. But look, he chose to leave and go play for the enemy, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. And Notre Dame is now, 2-0 against him in one-on-one battles? Well, actually 3-0 because Michigan tried to get involved in Boubacar Traore too. He visited Michigan. That was the only other school he visited that I'm aware of. So Al Washington is now 3-0 in the last month against Mike Elston. I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't enjoy that. Right. And that doesn't mean I don't respect Coach Stelson and appreciate what he did for Notre Dame the last 12 years. I do. But, when you make the decision to go play, be at Michigan, sorry, I can't, I'm rooting for your, I'm not rooting for your success in that regard against Notre Dame. So big pickup for Notre Dame, Ryan.
And let's also not forget the simple fact that now that Devan Houstan's in the class, Notre Dame has officially gotten back into that Maryland, DC area that we've been talking about them tapping into in this class. And now full sights ahead. I think someone mentioned this in the chat. Your defensive line class is basically done. There's one more big cog to the machine that they're going to be targeting, of course. And I don't want to take the onus off of Devan Houstan because this is his day and we're here to celebrate his commitment. But now you have one player left in this class. That's Jason Moore, and that completes what would be the best defensive line class in the class. And Devan Houstan, of course, is a big part of that.
Jason Moore would be huge, obviously. And look, here's the thing. You've got 4 guys committed by May 7th, which means the staff now can focus all their D-line energy in this class on Jason Moore. And he's going to visit in just over a month, June 10th. Ryan, I know you like where Notre Dame is, but I'd be curious to get your opinion on this, and we'll dive back into Devin here. We're going to watch some film. But I said yesterday that I think that Notre Dame is the leader, but I don't think they're the leader to the degree that he's not. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that he goes somewhere else and falls in love. I think it's close enough. I think they're the leader, but not like we thought with Devan Houstan or even some other guys that haven't committed yet. But now you've got a kid that's not too far from him, another Maryland kid that you're able to kind of say, hey, look, man, look what we're doing. And as Devin just pointed out, he's like, look what they're building, right? I mean, you look at what Notre Dame's building. With all due respect, I mean, you can go to Ohio State and they're doing some good things recruiting the D line, but right now you look at the 2021, 2 and 2023 classes, they're not out recruiting Notre Dame up front. You know what I mean? And at the very least, it's a stalemate at linebacker. And I would give them the edge to Notre Dame when you put 22 and 23 together.
Yeah.
So you've got a good thing to sell Jason Moore. Like, hey, man, you're not going to be catching no double teams at Notre Dame, buddy. You know what I mean? So they're going to be too busy thinking about Kian and Tyson and and Bubakar and Devan and Brennan and all these other guys, you're going to come here whether it's nose, 3, 5, 7, whatever position we put you at, you're going to be catching one-on-ones.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's a great selling point. But you had said something at the beginning, Ryan, and we're going to talk about this as we pull up the film. But you said something at the very beginning that I think needs to be discussed, and that is, this is a huge commitment from a need standpoint.
Yep.
Because the thing about Devan Houstan is we believe he can be a nose in this defense. I don't know if Donovan Heinisch can be a nose in this defense. He can be in the way that Howard Cross is. But I believe that ideally Notre Dame wants to get more mass up front. And Devan Houstan is certainly a huge, huge step to that. So when you talk about need at the position, and then you talk about the fact that Aiden Keanaaina, who was one of the only pure noses on the roster, just tore his knee up, and we don't know how he's going to respond to that and recover from that. And he didn't have a lot of experience to begin with. So having a guy that can play the nose, not a guy that you could move to nose like Brennan Vernon or Bubakar, maybe they could move to nose if you needed it. But I don't think we ever thought about that was their ideal. Maybe he could play it, but it's not ideal. I think as you project the positions that Devan can play, yes, he can play both inside spots, but I really like him at that nose spot. That adds even more value to what you're getting from Devan Houstan.
Yeah, no, I think what we've seen consistently across the board for 2023 is I think all these players could project to a couple different spots. I mean, even Kian Kelly, who is a preferred Viper, obviously, I could see a world where he's 265 pounds and he could be a strong side defensive end. Like he has that type of profile as well. I like the fact that Notre Dame is purely targeted long, athletic defensive linemen that can project to two different spots. There's no true nose, quote unquote, in this class, but there might be a couple of guys that end up being nose. It doesn't really matter ultimately because we know in this defense that Al Golden's going to be running with the Marcus Freeman influence. They are going to want to attack. This is not a two-gapping system. This is not we're going to stalemate at the line of scrimmage, linebackers make all the plays. Notre Dame's defensive line is going to go after the football. And whether that ultimately means that Devan Houstan is a 3-tech or a nose tackle, or Brendan Vernon is a strong side defensive end or a 3-tech or a nose tackle, or whether Jason Moore gets into the class eventually and he is a strong side defensive end or 3-tech, it doesn't really matter. All I know is that these guys are long, athletic, and they are going to attack, which I think is a nice change to say the least.
And the whole time you've got to worry about the best of the bunch, Kian Kelly on the weak side.
Exactly.
That's the thing. Like, that's what makes this class really, really unique. And look, getting a kid like this and getting Bubakar and getting Brennan Vernon, and if you're able to add Jason Moore, only makes it easier and easier to make sure that Kian wants to be a part of this. Because when you can say, hey, you can go to Alabama and they're not going to have a D-line class like the one you're a part of. You can go to Ohio State, Florida, they're not going to have the D-line class like the one you're a part of. Where else can you almost guarantee that you're going to get one-on-one blocking as much as possible? Bronx ND fan with a super chat. Saturdays with IB Nation and commitments. Let's make this a habit. I'm all for that. I support that thought tremendously. Ryan, let's do it. Let's dive into some film. All right. So as you watch this film, we're gonna pull this whole thing up here. You don't need to see us. You still don't need to see us. You're gonna see Devan wearing two different numbers in this film. He's gonna be wearing number 72 at times and number 8 at times. That's partly because there are some games where he plays offensive line, and when in those games he has to wear number 72. So you'll also notice, Ryan, as you can see right here in this film, right there, that is Devan. He's going to play a lot of 5 technique in this film, a lot on the edge. He'll play inside at times, but he actually, when you pop in the film, he actually plays more edge in a 3 down than he does, and even sometimes in a 4 down than he does playing inside and over the nose. So that'll obviously be something that'll be kind of part of his evolution, but kind of growing inside. But I think that speaks volumes, the fact that this kid can play outside. Here he is wearing number 72. Here he is also, that's 4 down front playing on the edge. Now, right there, that's Devan 6'4", 265, right? Look at this kid. That kid is pretty close in size to Devan Houstan, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that stands out to me about him beyond the size is he has powerful and fast hands.
Like, look at that. There.
I mean,
jolts him.
One hand, Ryan, like, look at that. Bam, just knocks him back and gets off. his potential for block destruction as more consistency comes from a technique is enormous, and that's another reason I love him as a nose. It's you might want to block that 72 guy.
Would be advised.
Just saying. This is one. Look at this burst off the edge. This is a kid that you're talking about being a nose tackle. Now, what you see here is two things. Number one, really good initial quickness. Number two, this is why he's more of an interior guy. The gear, once it gets around the edge, is not what it is with Boubacar and Brennan and those other guys, right? Yeah. That's more of an interior burst right there than it is an edge burst. But as a run defender,
a little bit of hip tightness. I was just going to say a little bit of hip tightness, which is fine.
I just think he's a bigger guy. You know, he's just not that. He doesn't have that speed that you see. But look at this. Look at him hustling. Love it. This is against Woodbury Forest. If some of you, a longtime recruitniks, recognize this field and this uniforms, this is where Greer Martini and CJ Procyse played high school football. Is who they're playing against right here. Woodbury Forest in Virginia.
He can run a little bit.
Yeah. As you can see here, good length, but not the same kind of elite length like some of the other guys. But he's definitely got at least above average. Look how fast his hands are, though, Ryan. This is what I was talking about earlier. They're not just strong; they're quick.
Yep. Like, and while I wouldn't call him again the most flexible player of all time, I will say he's twitchy for his size. Though he's got really nice bursts for his player his size.
But I think that you talk about flexibility. I think that's why he fits inside, because it fits well. I mean, he moves just fine for an interior guy, a 3 technique or nose, and that's just another reason why he's an inside guy. You had mentioned he could play on the edge. As a run defender, absolutely. Yep. Now, this is something that I marked in my notes that I want to see him get a little bit better at. He does have a tendency at times he gets his pads high. Like, this is on his highlight. This is not a highlight. Right? Like this is not a great play by him, but that's good. I want to see it. Like he'll lift up, peeking in the backfield. I like the eye discipline, right? But he's got to learn to keep those pads low. And you'll see that from him a few times where he kind of lifts up and doesn't quite have the same, the same kind of get off. Like right here, keeps those pads low and just really eats up ground, gets off the ball in a hurry. Gets into that kid, and just you see him go face to face, and then you see that separation where that kid just gets rocked back. This kid's really good, and he finishes pretty well at the quarterback too, which I like.
Yeah, I think he has a really nice closing burst for his size.
Yeah.
A little spin there.
This is him wearing number 8. I like this move.
I love defensive linemen with the single digits. By the way, I don't know if you do.
Watch the left hand on this. As he spins around, he reaches that left arm back to hook to make sure that guy can't get his hands back on him. That's a really instinctive feel right there with his hands. That's a really impressive play. Really impressive play. That offensive lineman actually does a decent job of staying on him from behind and kind of pushing him from behind and knocking him down. It should be a penalty, but good compete by that kid.
Here he is working inside.
Yeah, he's playing left tackle right here. This is an offensive clip. We're going to watch some offense later because on offense is when you really see him striking. Like, it's really impressive to watch him striking on offense. He just bench. People say bench press isn't important. I disagree. I think the wide bench press isn't important, but I think one of the most important lifts for a lineman is the close grip bench, and that's what you see from stuff like that. He's got really strong. He can just rock a guy back. Look at that. Just planting that kid back. Here is it. A little bit inside play. Oh, he's on the edge again.
Like you said, I think his biggest plus in the run game down the road is going to be block destruction because he's just got such nice hands. And his flexibility inside, especially, I think he's going to be able to get off a lot of blocks.
Yeah. Once the technique catches up to the natural ability, you're going to see him really hard to block. And again, look at the feel for this. Just like, this is a little tiny kid, but I just look at the footwork, look at the hands, right? Like I'm not impressed with him winning this because that kid looks like look, the kid's itty bitty, but it's of being able to evaluate the traits and the tools. That's what you look for.
Right. And if you have the clear advantage, you want him to win. And he won.
Right. He won a lot in this game. It was kind of sad. You go watch the full highlights. Here he's playing offensive left tackle again. And I love the fact that he's played offensive line. He actually, I mean, I don't think he could play it at a Notre Dame level, but he could play offensive line if he wanted to.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a better defensive lineman, but yeah. In his Woodbury game, he also recovered a blocked punt for a touchdown. I don't remember if it was in the highlights or not. Little slow get off there because he lifts a little bit there. You see that? That's what I'm talking about, Ryan. He gets a little bit of that lift where his feet aren't really covering a lot of ground. He stands up.
But you can still see those hands, man. He can jolt some dudes.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, I think, and you can really see it in the individual game highlights, which I would encourage everybody to go watch because there's a lot more of those than here. But it is in the highlight. The thing I like, you listen to him talk, right? And he's a really nice, polite kid. Comes from a great family. I mean, you saw his mom and dad there. Just Ryan, you've talked to the mom. Sounds like a really nice lady, and just good background, all that kind of stuff. But then you watch him play, and you're like, that doesn't look like the kid I just listened to talk.
Right.
Like really polite. Yes, sir. No, sir.
Well-mannered.
Gentle voice. And then you watch him play and you're like, this kid's mean. Like this kid has some ferocity to him. Like he is not nice to these poor kids he's going against. Watch a couple more of these, and then I want to get to the offensive line film. Look at that. That's impressive. That's him blocking. Like, goodness gracious. I don't know if y'all can see it, but the quickness off the ball is what I'm looking for here. He's got some really nice feet. When his footwork is sound, he's got some really nice feet. We're going to watch a couple more plays here, and then I want to dive to the offensive line film.
I mean, like you said, he's definitely a better defensive lineman than offensive lineman. But yeah, I wouldn't put it past Coach Houstan taking a look at a couple of these, being like,
Hey, look, y'all stole Jerry Tillery from me. All right, I owe you one. All right.
Right.
But with the offensive line class that Coach Houstan is going to be putting together, we think this year he may not have to. I'm going to watch some of these highlights here that of him playing this. There's some defensive clips in here too, Ryan, but it's a lot of offensive line clips. And I want you all in this particular game to focus on a couple things. Number one, his foot quickness. Number two, his punch and just his power. And you can see his demeanor, right? Like this is an athletic kid, like that plays with some ferocity, and the hand strength is just really impressive.
Yep.
What the heck happened to that kid? He must be shook. Look, this poor guy. I don't know what sniped or something. I don't know what happened to him. He got somebody punched him in the junk or something like that. Like that's what it kind of looks like.
That's a nut shot.
Or poked in the eye, maybe. Who knows? Look at this. This is one of my favorite plays. Watch this. Helmet gets knocked off. He does not give two rips about that. He is going to drive you all the way back to the end zone. Look at that. The ball's at the 4-yard line.
Yep.
Right. Helmet immediately comes off, and he drives this defensive end literally into the back of the end zone. Like, okay. That's not the soft-spoken kid that we just saw on do his commitment video, right? And I love when that switch can get turned on. I absolutely love it. But I really like this offense. Again, when I talk about liking his offensive line film, I'm not talking about as being an offensive lineman. I'm simply talking about you can see the toughness, the physicality, the quickness, the hand strength. It's a really impressive thing to watch. Here he is an offensive line again. Just rocks that kid.
Yeah, he doesn't even keep his feet moving either. That's just pure
strength.
Pure core strength right there.
Pure strength. Does a pretty good job of staying locked on too. That poor kid's like, man, I'm going to need an ice bath this weekend.
I feel bad for some of these teams because it looks like a little bit of a lower level, obviously. So a lot of these kids are playing both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids are probably like, oh man,
they're really rich private schools.
Too.
Yeah. It's like Sidwell Friends and like, you know what I mean? Like St. Pius, like these are some really a lot of these kids come from good backgrounds. Let's just say that good financial. Let me rephrase that. Good financial backgrounds is what I'm referring to.
Right.
But these levels also produce a decent amount of Division I football players, as Notre Dame has found out. Nice play, DB. Well done. Oh, not on that one.
Just every play though, Brian. Even when he's on offense, he just has and I feel like his punch location is pretty solid too. Like
he keeps his hands really tight.
Spot.
Correct. Yeah. He does a nice job of keeping his hands tight. I just kind of chuckled this one because we just got done saying like this kid doesn't have the length that the other guys does, and it's true. But look, I mean, it's not exactly a short arm dude. You know what I mean? Like,
no, he's got good length. He's got good length for the interior.
Yeah,
yep.
Just, compared to those other freaks in the class, maybe not as much, but you can just see they value that, and it's really impressive.
I mean, that's a good way to describe it, though. Notre Dame has a bunch of freak shows on the defensive
it really
line
just
class.
From a length standpoint, it's absurd. It really is absurd. So that's a quick film breakdown of Devan Houstan. Obviously, you see size, you see foot quickness. Ryan, I want you to watch some of that basketball clips later and just see him moving around. Just like, again, he's not a basketball player. But, when you're talking about getting your intramural squad together and you need a big that's just going to go down there and defend, block shots, and rebound and, knock down the occasional backdoor cut. Maybe he's left-handed because there's a couple times he drives to the hoop, catches the ball, and puts it up left-handed and knocks it in, like at the line or in the lane. But you can see the foot quickness, you see the length, you see the agility, you see the demeanor. I think that's another thing. He plays with an edge. We saw that from Boubacar. We saw that from Brendan Vernon. We see it from Kian. We see it from Devan. It's not just being talented, but do you play with the intensity that we need to have here? And that's another aspect of it that is really impressive. So that's Devan Houstan. That's breaking down his film. So obviously a big time pickup for Notre Dame in a lot of different ways.
He reminds me of Brian. I don't know if you like this comp or not, but he reminds me of Sam Mustafer's little brother, PJ. I kind of get vibes there. I get vibes. I don't know.
A little bit more athletic, I think the PJ was.
A little bit. PJ's a little bigger, but like the vibes
hand strength,
of the power,
the demeanor, the body type. He looks a lot like PJ did physically, size-wise, as a junior. If you go back, because PJ didn't go to the same high school that Sam did, and I can't remember what high school he went to. But PJ, very similar body type. I'd say that PJ was thicker. I think Devan's a little bit more athletic, but they were very similar. Mike Elko did a lot of good things at Notre Dame, like a lot of good things in just a year. But he made two huge mistakes during his evaluation period. He did not like two kids in the same class. He did not like PJ Mustafer, and he did not like George Karlaftis. I think actually they were in two different classes. But he did not like George Karlaftis or PJ. Yeah, they were two different classes, but he didn't like either one of those. And he was putting together that 2019 class. And Mike Elston didn't like George Karlaftis either. They thought PJ was an offensive lineman, which, yeah, exactly. But this staff didn't make that mistake. And I love the fact that there were people on the staff that really believe strongly that they need to go to 5 men in this year, and they fought for it. And I like that they fought for hey, we got a chance to have a game-changing defensive line class. Because if Notre Dame decided they were only going to go to 4, this is a kid they were still going to take. It would have been the last kid they got, Boubacar, that they wouldn't have taken. They were going to take Devan Houstan because of his positional fit. And but that also says a lot about him, that they were willing to not take Boubacar if they couldn't get to 5. And the fact that they were able to push to 5 is really just impressive in regards to being able to put this group together. So big pickup, Ryan. It's a big one. So, and then we always kind of do. Go ahead, Ryan. No, go.
No, I was just gonna say, to the point of loading up on the offensive and defensive line and numbers consistently, right? Like, we know that Notre Dame has to close the gap at defensive back. They have to close the gap at wide receiver at the skill positions. Like, we're very well aware of that, watching them play in Alabama, Georgia, so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that football is always dictated up front. And, Notre Dame has continued to do that. Like 4 great defensive linemen in the class, potentially pushing it to 5. Again, this is how the best teams in college football historically are built. No matter what era you play in, whether it is the passing era that we're playing in now, or we're in the double wing, triple option era in the old days, right? Like it's always won in the trenches. So Notre Dame continues to load up on those guys. I don't think that's going to be an issue for the near future.
Yeah. And what we always do on this part of the show, and we'll take some questions here as we wrap up, but what we always do at this part of the show, Ryan, is we kind of do so what's next for Notre Dame? And the interesting thing is the what's next is twofold. 2023, we kind of already talked about it, Ryan. It's Jason Moore bust. And one of the comments was, now Notre Dame can kind of, put some pressure on other guys they fill up. That they're not going to do that. It's they've basically said, hey, Jason, here's what it is. Here's what awaits you. Do you want to be on board or not? So there's not any pressure to fill up because there's nobody else on the board. They offered a kid from Maryland, another kid from Maryland who's a top 200 kid. They offered, was it Colton? I forget his last name. The kid from Texas, Vasic. They offered him and liked him, but it's just kind of like, look, we just like these other kids better. And then when they were able to make some headway with Boubacar and obviously able to convince Devan that to jump on board, and obviously it's like, look, with all due respect to those kids, we're not going to play that game where we're going to try to pretend that Jason, because Jason Moore's kind of good kid that's good enough to say, hey, fine, if you don't have room for me, peace out. You know what I mean? Right. Like, that's cool. I think what it does is not that it puts, and I think Sid Irish is the one who made that comment. I think he's right in a lot of instances that once you start to fill up, because we've talked about this, you can start saying, hey, man, do you want to be on board or not? It's just that with this particular situation, they're just not playing that game. They're just like, look, man, we love you. We want you. We got one spot left. It's saved for you. Let's get this thing done. And that's what they're focusing on. So not that angle is wrong, because I think it works and they're using it at other positions. But in this particular position, I think they chose to go a different direction to kind of say, they did it a little bit early, like, hey, we've got 4 spots and there's 5 guys who want to be on board. But right. I think they pretty quickly realized, like, that's probably not the way to go. I don't know if that's the best strategy here. Let's just tell all these kids, hey, you're the guys we want. We want all of you. And let's make it work. And they did that. And I think so far it's worked out. So that's obviously part of it where, now you can all your attention, get Drake and Kian and Brennan and now Devan and Boubacar. And you saw Boubacar tweet something out to Devan Houstan the other day, right? Or not like Boubacar tweeted out, but like the graphic was made for him and he tweeted it out like they've been doing, like, hey, you're next. We saw Peyton Bowen and Adon Schuler do that with Christian Gray, which I love. But you're going to see all those kids, Preston Zinter, all of them, Drake Bowen. Hey, Jason, you're the missing link. You're it. You're the next guy. So you've got now a month for Notre Dame. You've got a month to really make a splash with Jason Moore and wrap this thing up. I think that's really, really the key at this point in time. So. Yeah.
And Brian, if I could pull up real quick, I wanted to pull up Sid Irish's comments real quick. He says, so if Notre Dame gets Jason Moore, did they bat 1,000? Yes, right. And yes. Yeah, because I think there's some positions where you could say they batted very highly, but like there's maybe one guy they would have liked to get that maybe they couldn't get. But I mean, literally, if they get Jason Moore, that is the ideal class. It also became the realistic class all in one. Like crazy.
If you look at like offensive line, right? Like if they get Monroe Freeling, Charles Jagasol, and Sullivan Absher, that's a heck of an offensive line class. But you could say, look, they didn't really bat 1,000 because they also wanted Samson Okunlola. If you look at receiver, if they get Jaden Greathouse, Rodney Gallagher, Ronan Hannafin, you're like, man, that's a great receiver class. But they wanted Carnell Tate, right? So you did a great job, and you could argue you batted 1,000 of the guys that were kind of on the board, but they wanted other guys. This one, they literally identified these 5 guys as the guys they wanted. Now, there were other guys on the board like David Hicks and all that, but they liked Jason Moore more than him, no pun intended, because he's a top 50 recruit. I mean, Kian Kelly and Brennan Vernon were the guys they wanted right away. That's why the first 2 commits of the class were last June was Brennan Vernon and Kian Kelly, back-to-back days. They visited together and popped right after. And then, of course, Devan Houstan's been a guy they've been pushing for. Boubacar. Now, Boubacar is the interesting one because Jason they wanted from jump. Devan they wanted for a long time. Boubacar was the one where they went through some other edge players, the David Hickses and some of these other guys on the board, to kind of like, who's the guy we like the most, and then they went for Boubacar. Now, keep in mind, this has been a kid that had been committed to Boston College for over a year. And they got him, and he's from Mass, and so they were able to flip. They're primarily the reason that he decommitted, them in Michigan pushing for him. So yeah, I think you can make a strong case that they batted 1,000 once they zeroed in on, okay, here's who we want. I could think you can make the case that they batted 1,000 at the defensive line position. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good one. Oh goodness, here's one. Patrick Barnes with the super chat. Thank you, Patrick. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you back. How often do you guys at Irish Breakdown know in advance of who they are picking, but don't say anything out of respect to the players and their announcement? Thanks for the podcast while I work. More often, almost always, not always. I had no clue that Amorian Walker was going to commit to Notre Dame last year. Kind of took me off guard, and look how that one worked out, right? But more often than not, especially in today's era where these kids are going to be making decisions on TV and things like that, they go into these decisions, they usually know where they're going. It's more often than not. It's the signing day ones where you can kind of get a little bit of an intrigue. Yeah. But I think the last time I was really shocked, I'm just trying to think, probably Noah Boykin in 2018 was the last time that a kid picked Notre Dame in like a signing day scenario where we were like, what no one expected. Even the Notre Dame coaches didn't expect it. They were coming into the press conference. If you remember the story, they were coming into the press conference, getting ready for Brian Kelly's announcement. Also, we heard all this noise in the back. And they were watching Noah Boykin's commitment, and he picked them. Everybody thought he was going to go to Florida or Virginia. But normally we have an idea. Like we have an idea of what's going to happen. And so we try to let you all know kind of what we're hearing and what we're seeing without taking the kids' moment. But the other thing too is you need to be careful too, because kids can always change their mind. And it doesn't happen often, at least not right before the commitment. Usually when a kid changes his mind, it's after the fact, and there's a decommitment, a flip, and all that. But normally, once they've made this decision, because there's no one forcing them to make the announcement, they choose to do it. So we have a pretty good idea normally of these type of things. As far as when there's an announcement scheduled, we have a pretty good idea of that. And our stance has always been, look, we'll try to drop hints to give you guys an idea. We won't be too crazy about it, because at the end of the day, this is still this kid's moment, and it's his chance to tell everyone what he's doing. It's not ours. It's not 247s or on threes moment to have. It's his. And the way that you can kind of know that we knew what was coming is when we published 3 articles within 30 seconds of him committing. You can kind of have an idea that we had an idea that this was coming. Because I'll tell you what I don't do. I do not write commit stories just in case. I don't do that kind of stuff. But is he the only commit story I have written right now? No, he is not. I'll leave it at that.
Good tease. Good tease.
Yep.
I like that.
Don't you love it? Don't you love it? So let's get to some questions, Ryan. First of all, a comment from our guy Mace AK. Brian, are you saying that a former coach couldn't sell for 4 for 40? You'd think we didn't have a Sheffer on site or something. I love the pettiness of that comment. The saltiness of that comment is just wonderful. Just you speak to me, Mace. You speak to me. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah, it's not that he didn't sell the 4 for 40. It's just he sold it as a cliche, and then other people sold what it meant. Where Marcus Freeman talks about the deeper thoroughness to it. But again, that stuff hits home more when you have an actual relationship with a recruit. I mean, for all of you that have been recruiting this long, how many times did we ever hear when kids would talk about Coach Kelly? It was always like what Coach Kelly's building and want to play for Coach Kelly, but it was never about like in my conversations with getting to know so-and-so. That's what you're saying with Marcus Freeman. So let's dive into some questions here, Ryan, as we kind of wrap this thing up. We have a super chat from Garth Cassidy. Thank you for that, Garth. Does taking 3 D linemen last year make it possible to take 5 D linemen this year? So that is 8 over the last 2 years if we do, in fact, get Jason Moore. Yes, I think so. Now, if they would have got a 4th defensive lineman last year, I still wonder if they would have gone to 9 this year. I'd be curious about that, but the reality is we won't know that. They only signed 3 last year. And the other thing, too, is only one of last year's was like a pure inside guy, and that was Donovan Heinisch. I think Tyson Ford can play it, but Tyson Ford's more of an outside guy that could move inside. Aiden Goldbeyer is a pure outside guy. Whether it's Viper, maybe he moves to big end someday, he's a pure outside guy. But yes, I think only taking 3 last year. And then they only got 3 the year before as well. They had Will Schweitzer, Gabriel Rubio, and Jason Onye. I don't think they had more than that because Devan Houstan moved to linebacker and has since transferred. So I believe, I'm going to look this up, but I believe they only signed 3 the year before as well, which only added to the need for, yes, Devan Houstan was the 4th D lineman, but he ended up moving to linebacker. And Will Schweitzer was playing linebacker in the spring game. So I don't know if that's a permanent move or just something they needed to have for the blue gold game. But now obviously you also have to consider now too is last year's 3 is kind of now 4, right? Because it just hit me. They did move Josh Burnham to Viper. But if you look at Burnham and Gilbira, they're a little bit of a different kid than most of the kids that are in this class. They've only focused on one Viper in this class, and it was Kian Kelly, and they got him early.
He's 6'6", 240 already.
Right. Right. Their focus has been on the nose, the 3, and big. Those are the 3 that they've been focused on in filling up in this class. And then, of course, for next year's class. So we're actually, before we get to questions, I did want to know part of the what's next too, Ryan, is now that you've landed this elite class, if you're able to get Jason Moore, go to 5, go to 5. It's one of those days, man. That means the numbers for next year the needs aren't as great. You can be a 3 to 4 man class. And now that you've already got, if you're able to close up on Jason Moore quickly, and you've already got Brandon Davis Swain in the class in 2024, that means Notre Dame can really zero in on some high level players in 2024. That also matters because there's a lot of other schools that are going to be spending a lot of time the next 4, 5, 6 months trying to fill out their defensive line class in 2023. Notre Dame's basically done. It's one dude and that's it. One dude left and that's it. That means they can start putting the heat on, not putting the heat on, but up in their relationship building with guys like Justin Scott, the 6'5", 310-pound kid from Chicago, who's the number 3 player in the country, according to On3 that they just offered the other day, who goes to a private school, Catholic school kid in Chicago. They can focus on, okay, who's the Viper we want in next year's class? Who are the guys we want? And now you can have a more narrow field to work from. You can focus more on the Nigel Smiths, the Elijah Rushings. You don't need to have this big board. You can say we want those guys because numbers are not an issue next year. It's about impact talent, and it can be the beginning of this 2-year haul of 22 and 23 can be the beginning, if you do it right, of Notre Dame getting on the level where you could say nobody recruits the D-line better than us. Some people may be able to be on our level, but nobody does it better than us. That's what the Notre Dame staff has a chance to do, Ryan, if they can really get this thing going. And filling up this early is going to allow them to get a huge head start on some of those 5-star kids next year because, as the Alabamas and those schools and the USCs are pushing for Elijah Rushing and the Nigel Smiths and the high impact guys like that, they still have a bunch of 2023 guys they've got to recruit. Notre Dame doesn't. So Al Washington's focus for hopefully by sometime in June, Al Washington's entire focus now recruiting-wise is on fending off schools coming after Kian and Jason and Devin and Brubacar and Brennan if they're able to get Jason Moore in the class, which is a lot easier than trying to convince them to come. But now your focus is on next year's group. And that gives them just another leg up in that situation, Ryan.
Yeah, and the fact that they already have Brandon Davis Swain, who is a top 150 by pretty much every platform right now, is a great start because you mentioned the body types and the styles that they are recruiting heavy in this class with the big ends, potential moving inside. Brandon Davis Swain's kind of the same guy, right? Like he's 6'4", 240 already as a sophomore, so he's going to be a massive kid down the line. And I mean, early on, again, we are 2 years away from this class being really tangible. But there are some dudes on that defensive line class for 2024, it seems. Like you mentioned Nigel Smith. That kid is a absolute stud. That is your strong side end, maybe 3 tech down the line. Like that is what Jason Moore is this year. That's what Nigel Smith kind of is in that class. Elijah Rushing, maybe could be a Kian Kelly. We'll see. Obviously, he needs to develop out of Arizona, but that's the style that he plays. He's more of that Viper, maybe strong side defensive end because he's already – he's like a smaller guy, right? But he's 6'5", 225 already as a sophomore. So like he's going to be a massive kid as well. So yes, you set your sights, finish with Jason Moore if you can, set your sights on 2024 and
Right.
you be relentless as as they have been already in 2023.
Right. No question. I saw this. I'm sorry. This is great. From Kamikaze Fullback. Hit my girlfriend. I have to go to a Zoom baby shower at 4. Can you find something to do for an hour? Yep, I got this.
That's awesome.
Very, very well played. Got a super chat from Zach Martin. Now, Ryan, let's officially dive into our Q&A. Got a super chat from Zach Martin. Zach, thank you very, very much. Yesterday's show question, hypothetical. Would you take a 5-star transfer kid you recruited, but they took the NIL money for the first one, i.e. Quinn Ewers? You want to take a first crack at that, Ryan, that question? So basically saying, like, let's just say hypothetically, I think the example for Notre Dame would be Cardinal Tate.
Right.
Let's say Cardinal Tate takes a payout, takes an NIL deal somewhere, and in a year or two decides, you know what, I made a mistake. I should go to Notre Dame. What would your reaction be if you're Notre Dame? I have several thoughts on that, but I want to give you a chance to talk first.
It's a slippery slope, and I could see both sides of it, honestly. If I was on the Notre Dame staff, I would like to think that I'd always be open to adding great talent, right? And there's no question that in this specific example, you were talking about Cardinal Tate. Like, there's no doubt that he's a great football player and he would help your program. But I would question the fits, because what are the priorities, right? Like, the priorities is something, because the one thing about Notre Dame is, yes, they are on the major lookout for great talent. There's no doubt. But then also there's that other side of it where you also want to add great young men. And that's not saying that the kids that are all going for the NIL money aren't great young men. I'm just talking about priority side of that character type of concern. So I would say I wouldn't be incredibly open to it, but I'd be open to the conversation, but I would be hesitant. Like, it would have to be the right player who maybe, there are players that make mistakes. Like, these are young men. These are 17, 18-year-old kids who maybe they made a mistake and maybe they prioritize some things that maybe they shouldn't have prioritized in the recruitment. So I wouldn't hold it necessarily against them. It's just a case-by-case basis, in my opinion.
I think you nailed that last part. It's got to be case by case. And that's because the reasons why they took the money have to matter. If a kid took the money because that's just what he wanted and he was chasing that, I'd be a little skeptical, because that tells me he's looking for things that maybe we aren't all about. And if a kid went to another school, took money, and he's not playing, I'm probably not going to look at him. If a kid goes there and he's playing, but he just isn't happy there, I'd probably be more willing to look at him, because now he's got buyer's remorse because he's not playing, right? And that would probably turn me off a little bit. I think you also have to be mindful of the situation in regards to, okay, why is he looking for this money? Was there a strong parental or adult influence in his life that was pushing him in that direction? I'm going to be a little bit more sympathetic to that, because now that he's away from them and he's at a school, he realizes he made a mistake and came back. So like a Cardinal Tate. Let's say Cardinal Tate goes to Tennessee, just for argument's sake, and he plays as a freshman, but he's just miserable. And he's like, man, I should have gone. And he wants to come to Notre Dame. I'd probably be more open. Now, I'd want to have some conversations with him and find out, hey, where's your head at? Do you understand we can't do this for you, right? Like, you get that, right? And I would need him to understand that. And you've got to prove yourself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then I'd be open to a kid like Cardinal Tate. A kid like Quinn Ewers, who went through the process of graduating early, selling out basically his high school teammates so he could get a payday. I want no part of that kid on my football team. None. Here's the thing about Cardinal Tate. For all the issues I have with how Cardinal's handling things, Cardinal is a competitive kid. He's there with his teammates. I've never heard anything about him being a bad kid. I just think he's, in my opinion, making some decisions that I think are ill-advised. He's focusing on short-term gain in such a way that I think he's sacrificing long-term success. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
I think he's acting in a way on social media that I don't like. And if I was someone advising him, we would have a very strong conversation about it. I'm all for you doing things to gain followers from other teams, but starting to pick at other fan bases, that's not, like, I've always praised his savviness on social media. He's crossed the line in some instances lately. I would have some things to say, but I just think that's more of a young kid who's trying to build a following, because knowing that that's going to result in some potential deals. I'd be a little bit more sympathetic to him if his scenario was, you know what, coach, I made a mistake. I took the money. I had my whoever in my family or pushing me, and my heart. Because I've always felt, what have I always said? If NIL wasn't a thing, what have I said this whole time? Cardinal Tate's going to Notre Dame. I truly believe that. So I have to have some sympathy for a 17-year-old kid who's got people in his life saying, take the money, take the money, take the money, as opposed to a kid that literally bailed on his high school football team so he could go enroll early to a school that apparently now wasn't his dream school, right? Because that's what he's saying now that he's at Texas. I always wanted to go to Texas. Well, why'd you go to Ohio State first?
It's because NIL wasn't legalized in Texas at that point.
Correct.
So he went up to Ohio, and then once it was, then he came back to Texas.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was all you would sell out whoever you want, who you needed, to your whole high school teammates, all of it, to get that payday.
Sure.
I can't have a guy like that as my starting quarterback. Can't.
It's fair. It's fair.
So to his point, it's and the other thing too is I have to have a need for you. Like if Notre Dame signs the receiving class that we're capable of, and let's say they get off to a great start in 24, let's say they get Emmett Mosley, let's pull up a couple of these 2024 recruits, Ryan, to kind of
Micah Hudson's a guy.
Micah. I mean, there's some
Ryan Pelham,
really,
Zion Reagan.
There's some really good 2024 receivers that are on the board. Not a lot of them have visited. You've got Nicholas Marsh, Jeremiah McKellen, right? There's some guys like that. Jason Richardson, Joseph Stone, Ryan Wingo. Let's say they are able to get back on him. If they land Jaden Greathouse, Ronan Hannafin, Rodney Gallagher in this class, right? Just hypothetically. And they've already got a couple guys next year. I may have to think about that because it's like, these guys wanted to be here. We have to go. I'll tell you something else. I would make the kid that wants to come. I would make him work for it a little bit, and not in a petty way, but more of a, I want to really see where your heart's at kind of way. And if I turn you down once and say, I'm not sure, are you just going to then go running somewhere else? Or are you going to keep coming at me? Right. I'm going to be honest. I would need to see a little bit of that to feel better about bringing that kid on as well. Let's get to some more questions here. Ryan, Sid Irish with a great question. Why is Ronan Hannafin a 3-star?
Do you want the honest
we
truth?
all know one reason.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'll say it. He's a white receiver from Massachusetts.
There you go.
That's why. That's the reason, right? Like,
right.
Let's be honest about it. He doesn't play in a great. It's a good football state. There's some players that come out of Massachusetts, but it's not a great football state, right? For producing high school, college football players, I should say. He's a white receiver, so there's some preconceived notions that come to your mind about him. Although, if you watch,
I had that conversation today, Ryan.
Yeah,
I had a guy tell me, it's like, I don't know how I was like, dude, he's a 4.4. No,
he runs in the 4.4s
yeah.
at 6'3".
Yeah.
Like,
he is.
Yeah,
and he's like, oh wow, well that changed things. I'm like, why did he assume that he wasn't a 4.4 guy?
Right.
It's the geography. It's the two things together. The other aspect of it too is he's not a kid that's gone to a bunch of camps. He doesn't do the rivals camps and all that stuff.
Yep.
He's a quiet kid. He's not a kid that's out there like building a name for himself. But look, here's the deal. Bama wants him hard. They're pushing for him hard as a receiver. Clemson wants him. Oklahoma wants him. USC's recruiting him. And of course, Notre Dame wants him.
Yep.
And, I don't believe star rankings are the end all be all. I don't think offer lists are the end all be all. But you look at the combination of film and offers, and it's kind of like, okay, these programs, Alabama doesn't just come up to Massachusetts for anybody, right? Especially skill players. It's not like the Southeast is hurting for 6'2.5" receivers that can run. There's a few of them down there. So I think it's important. I think he's a really important recruit. But yeah, I agree. Now, not everybody has him. I bang on Rivals all the time. I believe Rivals is the only group that has him as a 4-star. Now, they don't have him in the top 250, which to me is absurd. I think Ronan Hannafin is a top 150 player. I do. I think he is. How many kids can move like him and can legitimately start at the Power 5 level at 3 different positions on 2 sides of the ball?
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
that list is not long. Ryan, nope. It's not long at all.
Nope.
Sid Irish, have you addressed this one at first, Ryan? Sid Irish says, why do I not get a good feeling about Jagasol? He seems to be trending away. Hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, I'd
ahead.
say this. I would say this. I wouldn't say that he's trending away per se. I
Right.
would say that they're the leader and he's leaving things open, right? Like it's not
Right.
being resolved to this point. Like there's not a commitment date that we know of in the near future. So I think Notre Dame's still in a good spot with Jagasaw. I almost said Jagusa as well. But the fact of the matter is, as long as it's still open, it's still open. That's the reality of it right now.
Mm-hmm. I think, look, he's not trending away. And we said yesterday, I said that I think that, my confidence level has dipped a little bit, but it went from like 8 to 7. Notre Dame is clearly in pole position. Why is not feeling good? I don't know. Maybe it's BK PTSD. Maybe it's that you tend to look at things a little bit negatively, Sid. I love you, but you do. And I think the other thing too is because it's part of it, I think, is our fault. I think, honestly, I think part of it's our fault because we really did think he was going to commit when he visited in April. I did. That's all the intel we got, and so we kind of made it seem like, I think this is going to be could end soon. So then he's like in no hurry and like wait until June. I think that can make people get the impression. So I'll take some responsibility for that. I'll take some responsibility for why some people are thinking Charles Jagasaw is trending away. I think I'll take that. I'll own that. But just from an intel standpoint, I don't feel that way. I don't feel like Notre Dame is trending away on him. They just got to keep recruiting and keep and just close. But I'll say this is my kind of not my giveaway, but my best way to sum it up. I'd rather be Notre Dame right now in his recruitment than anybody else, and that includes Michigan. I would much rather be Notre Dame, and that's kind of how I think about it. And yeah, that's how I think about it. John Mayo I love this comment. He says the most important thing I heard him say, talking about Devan Houstan, is when I'm on the field, I never shut up. We need more of that trash talking swag. As long as it's backed up by play, yeah, I do like that. I know my dad and I have argued about this for years. I like guys that play with a little bit of in your face because I grew up. Think about who I grew up, rooting for in basketball. I mean, my childhood hero in sports. I mean, even more than John Elway was Larry Bird. I mean, there's not a bigger trash talker in the history of the NBA, in my opinion, than Larry Bird. Right. And so I like it because I think trash talking, if you do it right and you're a good player, Ryan, you get people's heads and take them out of their game. That's not just basketball. That's true in football too.
Yep.
And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Ryan. I don't know if you're one of those just go play ball, kind of guys. There's trash talking, and then there's like when Coach Freeman got on Maris Luafau after the pick, like, it wasn't so much an act like you've been there before, but if you go listen to him, he's like, don't get us a 15-yard penalty.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's a line you can cross and you got to know it. But that, to me, that doesn't equal trash talking. Okay. You're being a knucklehead at that point in time.
I talked a lot, man. I'll say that there is definitely a line that you cannot cross, but I like guys that teeter that edge. I do. Especially on defense. Like you need to play with that, man. Like you have to. You have to be a little bit psychotic at times, like you do. So if Juliet wants to talk trash in whatever sport she plays someday, if she's a sports person, I'll let her. As long as she doesn't get disrespectful, she can talk some trash. Absolutely.
That's the key. Don't get personal. Yep. Don't talk about somebody's mama, right? But that's not trash talking. Hey, that's what I love about most of you watch these, YouTube's got some great Larry Bird trash talk videos. Mm-hmm. But it's usually within it's the game. Like the one time you ever talked about a mom, Craig Elo told a story is your mom in the stands? It was more about is she gonna see what I'm about to do to you? Oh. My favorite was he looks down. It was a Frank Layden was the coach of the Jazz, and he's just killing the Jazz. And he goes up to Frank Layden. M.O. Carr tells the story, and he says, "You got anybody on that bench can guard me? Because these guys out here can't." And he said, Frank Layden looked down the bench and he goes, "No." Freaking great. I love stuff like that. But I mean, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, two elite players, but they were great trash talkers. Because I think if you do it right, it can pump you up, but it gets somebody's head. Where I don't like it is when you get personal or when it becomes a distraction. And it can be. Some kids just can't do it without it being a distraction. And as long as it's not that, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But you better do something first. I hate guys that make a tackle after a 4-yard gain and get up like they did something.
I hate guys that celebrate when they're down by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys.
Exactly. Ty B with IB Nation. My son just won his flag football championship. He's pumped. Ty B, tell him congratulations. Absolutely. He is a champ. And tell your wife again that I said thanks for letting you come back on the message board. I appreciate that very, very much to both of them. But yes, we have a champion, a father of a champion in our midst today, everybody. David Solomon says, I'm sure when Jim Harbaugh hired Mike Elston, he was counting on Elston to be the difference in these Michigan versus Notre Dame recruiting battles, but he couldn't have foreseen Al Washington's influence. I think it goes beyond that. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously they didn't know that he was going to replace him with Al Washington. Jim Harbaugh knows very well what Al Washington do. He employed him for a year, but I don't think they necessarily saw that was going to be the move. But look, it's the same problem. Elston's having the same problem now that he had at Notre Dame. You can't do it by yourself. Because here's the thing. Notre Dame, Al Washington didn't beat Mike Elston. Al Washington was part of a group of coaches that included Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden that beat Mike Elston too, right? Like let's think about that as well. And Jim Harbaugh is not exactly known as an elite recruiter to the way that other coaches are. I mean, he does the work, but he's kind of a weird dude. Like I've heard as many kids in my day kind of be like, yeah, that guy kind of turned me off. Like maybe he wouldn't have, if he wouldn't have talked to them, I had a better shot. Right. I think it's just the overall vibe around that program. I mean, how can you sell a kid on coming here when you basically let it be known that you didn't want to be here anymore as yourself? Right. I mean, that's really a big part of this whole thing. So that's where I don't feel bad for Mike Elston because he made the choice, but I somewhat feel like he's had some bad luck because it's like no matter where he goes, he walks in these situations where there's things outside of his control that keep him from recruiting at a high level. And that's why he settled a lot of times for guys. And he's doing that at Michigan, like he's out there getting Brooks Barr and Notre Dame's out there getting, Devan Houstan and Boubacar Traore and, and those kind of guys. So, but yeah, I mean, we talked about this yesterday, Ryan. Jim Harbaugh, the way in which Jim Harbaugh handled this offseason, he's in Minnesota on signing day. He's telling people he's getting the job. They are recruiting. Did I say this early in the show, or did I say this to you on the phone or somebody on the phone earlier? I said this today. So if I said in the show, I'm repeating it. I apologize. But if I said on the phone earlier, then I think you guys will appreciate this. Michigan right now is recruiting like they just had a 6-6 season. They're not recruiting like a team that just won the Big Ten, stomped Ohio State, and went to the playoff. They're not. Like all the momentum they should have got from being a playoff team is gone, and that's 100% on Jim Harbaugh. I mean, he's the reason that they are in the situation that they're in because of the way he handled other schools coming after him or the NFL, I should say, coming after him. And I be honest with you, I don't feel bad for him, to be honest with you, because that's the bed you made, right? And I appreciate that he was honest with kids when he was, when he was looking, right? And I appreciate that, but I don't like the way that he handled it. All right, so Ryan, Big Jim wants to know: did your wife stick you in a broom closet?
You see, Jim, when a baby's running amok sometimes, and you don't want a baby screaming in the background, there are some things that you have to do. Okay. And I'm not in a broom closet. I'm just in the hallway of my bedroom. Okay. So stop judging, sir, but I appreciate you.
I love it, Jim. I absolutely love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. Guinea pig clips. He hits it on the nails it right in it. It's right on the head. Notre Dame is destroying Michigan in recruiting. And we talked about this in the show yesterday. We'll need to rehash it again, but I really don't know. I really don't know if I can think of a kid outside of maybe Charles Jagasaw. And again, I still, like I said, I would much rather be where Notre Dame is than anybody else, but I can't think of a kid that they're in on. And I mean, they're talking about like Jair Hill is one of their top targets. Notre Dame's not even recruiting that kid anymore. No. And they could have had him in the class already if they wanted to. They chose not to. And Michigan's like begging that kid to not go to Illinois and pick them. It's not, I mean, this is not what a team that just went to a playoff should be doing, Ryan. It's just not.
Yeah. No, it's two teams that are trending in very different directions, right? Like they both, that Michigan 11-2 last year too, right? They ended up with 12-2, whatever they ended up being. Yeah.
Because they were 12-1 because they won the Big Ten title, so they went 12-1 and lost to Georgia.
Yep. So, I mean, they're in a relatively same ballpark from a win-loss perspective, but the teams are trending in much different directions from a coaching staff perspective and from a recruiting perspective. So, yeah, you nailed it, man. It's not great right now for Michigan. It's not. Like, let's call it is. And I'm going to love it because I don't like Michigan, but, I still would like the teams like in Michigan, and we've talked about this before, the Miamis, the Florida States, like you want those teams to be relevant, though. You want them to be a good programs. You want them to be competitive. It helps.
You don't want your
everybody.
rival to suck, because then beating them, it's like Stanford sucking has not helped Notre Dame. USC sucking has not been good for Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. So you want them to be good enough to kind of make an impact, but you also want to be good enough, not to be good enough where they're beating you. So, yeah, we shall see. Let's get to some more questions here. We have some super chats here that we'll get to. ICURN with Irish Luck. Both Josh and Aiden, you gave 5-star upside, but Josh was ranked ahead. Now with Josh's move, is that still the case? I haven't really that's a good question. I haven't regraded them. I would say probably yes. I'd probably still have him because I did talk when he signed that I could see him maybe outgrowing that position, and that was kind of part of it. But I'd have to really think about that one. Basically, what he's asking is I gave Josh Burnham and Aiden Goodbye both 5-star upside grades last year, but I ranked Josh higher as a player. That was with me thinking Josh was going to be a linebacker. I'd have to really think about that one. That's a really good question, and I really haven't thought about it. It doesn't change my upside grade for Josh a whole lot. But I don't know if Josh can be quite as elite as a defensive end as he was as a linebacker. I'm not sure if I feel that way. And part of it is just I haven't seen him a ton. So that's a good question. I've already kind of gone back and forth in my head as I've been reading through and talking through this. So, I'm going to have to think about that one. Ryan, do you have kind of an immediate reaction to that question? I don't know who you had ranked higher in last year's class. You may have had Aiden already higher than Josh last year.
No, I like Josh a little bit more than Aiden. It's an interesting conversation because Aiden, I thought, obviously projects to the position better. And now you're going to be able to compare them closely. I'd say I'd still go Josh because I think that Josh gives you a little more versatility at the position. Like Aiden's probably going to be a better pure pass rusher than a Joshua Burnham. But the fact that Joshua can do so many different things, dropping into coverage, playing in space, working on the first and second levels. Like I think that there just may be a little more upside for Joshua Burnham, but it's a very interesting conversation. Sounds like a good article. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Let me write that down here real quick. So you think I'm joking? I got my notepad.
I don't think you're joking.
Yeah,
I was planning that for a reason, man. I was planning that one.
Burnham and Gobira. There we go. All right, good one. Well done. I love it when you guys can come up with show ideas and article ideas. Absolutely beautiful. And thank you for the super chat as well. Toe Jam, 1992. Time for my IB tithing. New coaches tend to have a rough start. If we drop a few games, how hard will it be to keep this class together? I don't think it'll be entirely together. You may lose a kid or two, but I don't think so. No, I think the kids have bought into Marcus Freeman, but I also don't think that they're going to have a rough start. I mean, the schedule's set up nicely to where after the Ohio State game, there's not a team on the schedule that's on Notre Dame's level talent-wise or really even close until game 5, right? And that's BYU. I mean, even then it's like, no, they're on their level. It's not really, I mean, if we're being honest, it's not till November 5th when they play Clemson. That's the next time after Ohio State that they play a team that's on their level. So I'd be shocked if Notre Dame, like at worst, from at the end of October, they've got 2 losses. They're 6-2 at worst, in my opinion. And I don't think that's a rough enough start to cause them to lose anybody. Now, if they lose 2 and then get spanked by Clemson and lose to USC in a bad fashion and go 8-4, could that cause a kid or two to flip? Sure. But I don't see it. I really don't see it. Because I also think it's about relationships, right? I mean, that's a big thing too. I remember when Notre Dame went through their 4-8 season, and we interviewed some people. We talked behind the scenes to some people close to Pete Werner, and it was like, nobody from Notre Dame really talks to me anymore. Well, yeah, you're going to lose that guy. I don't view that as being an issue with the staff. I really don't.
No, I don't think so either. I also think it helps that you have a lot of great recruiters in this class that are obviously close knit already. Yeah, that stuff just drives you crazy, man. Because that's just, I mean, to recruit at a high level, you also need to keep recruiting the players that commit. Like that's not, right. It's not just to focus on the uncommitted players. So yeah, I agree. It's. I don't think that's going to be an issue moving forward. I really don't.
A little bit of a somber moment here. I do want to pull this up from a longtime listener, Connor Patton, with a super chat. Thank you, Connor. Please pray for my good friend who just went into a coma, or who went into a coma. Connor, you got it, man. You absolutely got it. So if you don't mind, maybe shoot me an email or a DM or something. Let me know what your friend's name is. I would really appreciate that. But I mean, you know how IB Nation is, right? We always step up when those things are asked of you. So we will definitely do that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jay Clampett Investments asks Ryan, I think that Coach Freeman, being as young as he is and being a highly rated football player himself, with his pro career not panning out, has the unique ability to sell the opportunity Notre Dame offers. I think that is a great point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is a great point right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Coach Freeman would have loved to have a long NFL career, but unfortunately there were circumstances that prevented that. And I think that he can give Notre Dame players not only the perspective of playing at a high level, being a high recruit, getting drafted into the NFL, but also the fact that the long term is going to outweigh the short term in a lot of instances, right? Like there's no guarantees that football is going to be the long term. So yeah, I think Coach Freeman, while also being a younger guy, can really connect in a lot of different ways to recruits. So I think that he can connect with parents in a lot of ways too, in that instance too, right? Like a lot of those things that parents are going to worry about, right? Like the long-term future of their kids. So yeah, I think that's a big, not only on just building a program, but then also obviously on the recruiting trail. I think Coach Freeman can bring a perspective that is pretty unique, to be honest, very unique.
Ryan, I have to do it. I have to ban someone from our chat. Matt Riggleman, I'm sorry, man. You can't speak this blasphemy into our chat. Maryland's greater than Virginia. I mean, I don't know how you expect me to handle that, Matt. I'm like that. Got my hand on that block button, and I'm just trying not to do it because I'm trying to be in a good mood. But speaking those blasphemies into the channel, come on, man. You got to show me more love and respect than that. I see what you're doing, Matt. I see what you're doing. Hey, look, one guy in this chat that we give a hard time to sometimes, and it's all in love, is David Solomon, right? And David's, because we kind of tends to look at the, we feel that he looks solid, but hey, I think this isn't the one. It was a different one. This one, he says, I was really disappointed that, like everyone else, when he missed out on Anthony Lucas and Hero Kanu in 2022. If they get Jason Moore as well, they will have completely made up for it in 2023. And I think that's a great observation, David. Yep. Now, obviously, the ideal moving forward is to, in 2024, get the version of Anthony Lucas, right? Not miss on those guys and not have to make it up the next year. But I think he's absolutely right that I feel a whole lot better about where they are in the D-line after missing on Anthony Lucas. Hero Kanu, not so much, but Anthony Lucas, if they're able to get Jason Moore. But we do give you a hard time, David. It's all love. But, when you come with the positivity, man, we gotta pull that up, and we got to show that to you. And he also said another positive thing here is he said 2023 linebacker and DB recruits have to be taking notice of Notre Dame's defensive line haul, and that can't hurt in recruiting these positions. And Ryan, he's absolutely spot on. I mean, it does. It helps. And you signed 2 top 100 guys last year too. They have to be taking notice. And linebacker haul has also been pretty good. I mean, they signed 3 top 100 linebackers the last 2 years. And that doesn't include Junior Tuihalamaka, who was a top 100 by one other service. I think ESPN had him top 100. So 4 kids that you've signed in the last, the 3 that you got signed last year and then 1 commit this year are top 100 players. So it's not like you've got DB commits are going to be looking at both and saying, man, they're doing something pretty special there. And, like somebody in the chat, I'd have to go through and find it, but he made the comment about he just has a feeling that Caleb Downs is going to pick Notre Dame. I don't share that optimism. I hope he's right, but I'm going to tell you what, the best way to give yourself a chance for a kid like Caleb Downs is to be like, look, dude, look at Georgia, look at Ohio State, look at all the schools you're going to, and you tell me, all right, not what they've put in the NFL so far, because you're not playing with Trayvon Walker and Devontae Wyatt and all those other guys. You're not playing with them. You're playing with the guys that are going to be in 22 and 23 and 24. And you tell me if any of those schools are recruiting the front 7 better than we are. And I don't know if you can say that they are. I mean, Texas A&M had a great defensive line haul last year. I'm not touching their linebacker class compared to Notre Dame's. I'm not. And so it's like, it's a whole group. And Notre Dame's obviously did pretty well last year on the D-line, and they're blowing it out of the park this year. So, Ryan, that's a way where you can maybe win those upsets over with the Caleb Downs. Again, I'm not saying they're going to get Caleb Downs. I'm on record yesterday saying I'd be shocked if they get Caleb Downs. But this kind of thing doesn't hurt. I will say that. It certainly doesn't hurt. when you're recruiting the front seven the way that Notre Dame has.
Well, we talk about it with the quarterback position, obviously on the offensive side of the ball, when you're continuing to get great pass catchers and offensive linemen. It's the same on defense. I mean, the defensive line, it attracts a lot of defensive backs because they understand that I'm going to get a lot more opportunities because guys are going to be throwing in adverse situations. There's going to be some forced throws. I'm going to be able to make some plays on the football. And then linebacker especially, they understand there's nothing. I mean, watch Georgia this past year with guys like Nakobe Dean. Nakobe Dean was a really good player, but I mean, he had a lot of space to navigate without much traffic, right? Like they understand those guys doing the dirty work up front makes them look good. So yes, it absolutely attracts. There's no question about that.
Thank you for that, David. And I appreciate that you take some of our chop busting that we've done and stick with us. And I loved your comments today. Paul Keene, Notre Dame already has 3 more 4 to 5-star recruits in 2023 than they did the entire 2020 class.
That's crazy.
Here's something crazy for you too, Ryan. Notre Dame has 12 kids committed now in the 2023 class, right? All 12 of them are composite 4-star players, 4 or 5-star players. All 12 of them.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little wild. Yeah, I mean, it's really impressive. That's really, really impressive. They are definitely off to a hot start. Here's one for you, Ryan, from Antoine Porcher-Rideau. What commit will be the biggest surprise to the both of you in 2023 that y'all don't think Notre Dame will get a commitment from?
It's very pessimistic. I don't like that.
Well, yeah, so it's basically like you don't think what commit will be the biggest surprise? I mean, for me, biggest surprise for me would be if they got Caleb Downs. That would be the surprise for me. Like if let's just say hypothetically that in a few months, Cardinal Tate has a change of heart and is like, I want to be at Notre Dame, and I know the money's this, but I want to be. That wouldn't necessarily shock me because I think he's always loved Notre Dame. I've never felt like I'm not expecting it to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't see Cardinal Tate coming, but like it wouldn't shock me if Caleb Downs at some point in time said I'm going to Notre Dame. That would shock me. That would definitely shock me. There's no question.
So, see, I read this question as who would be a surprise that they do not get. So that would be someone that I think Notre Dame has a good chance at.
Yeah,
right?
I did. See,
that y'all don't think Notre Dame will get. So I would say, I mean, Jagasaw would probably be my guy because I felt pretty good about it for a long time.
What commit will be the biggest surprise to the both of you in 23 that y'all don't think Notre Dame will get a commit? So I kind of take it. Antoine, could you help us clear this up? Because there's a couple like double negatives in there that make it a little bit hard to. Are you saying like who would surprise commit that you think Notre Dame will get, or who is the guy that we think they're going to get that we? Because knowing Antoine, he's usually really optimistic. So my guess would be, and that maybe that's why I took it the way I took it, Ryan, is because I know Antoine, and you're still kind of new and learning these guys, but he's usually pretty optimistic. He's a lot like Michael Campbell in that regard. You know what I mean? Like really looking for positive things and all that stuff on it. So I'd be curious, Antoine, to kind of know what angle you're coming from on that one, and that because I think the answer for me would change a little bit in that regard. Absolutely,
exactly.
A, B, C, D, E, F. Getting Jaden Osbury out of LSU territory would be a big upset also. Absolutely. Ryan, there was somebody on our chat or on our YouTube channel that said, that they shouldn't take Osbury. They should just go for Samuel Mpemba because he doesn't like, tweener players. I don't know where you stand, but as far as like my favorite players, maybe not the 5 best, but my 5 favorite players, Jaden Osbury is 100% in my top 5. I absolutely love that kid. And I'm not saying he's one of the 5 best. I'm just saying I absolutely love that kid. I think that kid is a football player. I mean, and forget the angle of beating Brian Kelly for a kid in his backyard. I don't care about all that for the second. Like it'd be fun, but like just this kid, like when you talk about Notre Dame fit, you talk about Marcus Freeman's made a comment. There's kids that are Notre Dame fits, and we got to convince them they're Notre Dame fits. That's how I feel about Jaden Osbury. I think this kid would thrive at Notre Dame on and off the field in a way that I don't even think he realizes yet. And that's why I've always felt like, man, I wish they could get that kid because I think he would do so well at Notre Dame in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I don't really like the tweener argument because I could argue that Mpemba's as much of a tweener as Jaden Osbury.
He's more. Right? He meant size-wise.
Oh, size-wise.
Yeah, size-wise. Not like position-wise, but tweener. Like because he's 6 foot, 200 pounds. I think he meant more size-wise.
Even if Notre Dame gets another 1 or 2 linebackers, I would still keep it open for Osbury. I think he's that good of a football player. And again, I know you talked about, you're not going to use the side of, stealing a guy out of the bayou, but I am petty, so I will take that side.
I will take it and I will have
Yes.
fun with it, and I will probably do a whole show on it if it were to happen. What I'm saying is that's not why he's one of my 5 favorite players. Like if he was from, Boise, Idaho, he'd be one of my 5 favorite players. I'm saying it's like I love the kid as a player. Now, would that add some intrigue to the recruiting story? Heck yeah, it would. But that's not why he's in my top 5. That doesn't matter to me in regards to top 5. I absolutely love that kid. I think he's smart. I think also that he would have an impact. I mean, you got a kid out of Baton Rouge, for even if Ed Orgeron was there, that would send shockwaves. You got a kid out of LSU's backyard that's a top 50 recruit. What does that say about what Notre Dame's doing? I think it'd be one of those things too. Then if you're able to beat Brian Kelly for it, I think it would absolutely destroy everything that's being said about where Notre Dame is at. So I think it would be absolutely. It would be stoic behavior, says Brian. I really want Jaden Alsbury. He's very talented, but it's another sting in the face of Kelly considering Jaden's from LSU country. And I don't disagree with any of that. I think all of that is spot on. My only point is while all of that is true and would add to the joy of getting him, I'm just making sure that people understand that that's not why he's one of my 5 favorite players. He's one of my 5 favorite players because he is a really talented football player, smart football player, instinctive football player. To me, the epitome of a student athlete, great student, great family. I just love the kid. I think he's a heck of a player. John A1 asked, would Notre Dame take both Alsbury and either Gillette or Mpemba? Is it first come, first serve? I think Notre Dame would take 2 of those 3 in this class. I do. I think they would do if they got Alsbury, I think they'd still take one of Mpemba or Gillette. And if they got one of Mpemba or Gillette, I think they'd still take Alsbury. I think of those 3, it'd be the first 2 to commit would be the ones most likely to me that would be there. No question. Savage Science Fitness. I'm very curious how old you are to say this. Hey, Brian, I'd say Jordan and Kobe would talk trash talk a lot more than Bird. With Jordan wouldn't say that, and Kobe probably wouldn't have said that. You need to go online and do some YouTube searching, because I'm going to go on a limb saying you're probably young, in your 30s or younger, and nobody that grew up in that age would say it. Larry Bird talked more trash than anybody that and NBA players say that. So there's no doubt about it. All right, let's get to some more questions here. Sid Irish, Brian, is Chad Bowden the new Vinny Serrato? I mean, yeah, he is. I mean, the reality is that he's doing the exact same role that Vinny did. I honestly don't know if we've talked to a recruit yet, and I'm being serious on this. I don't know if I could name a single recruit that we have talked to in the last 6 months, especially, who has not mentioned Chad Bowden at some point in time. I honestly can't think of it. I really can't. I'm sitting there still racking my head trying to think of a guy, and I really can't. I can't think of a single guy that hasn't mentioned Chad Bowden as being part of that recruitment. And that's what Vinny did, right? I mean, now Vinny was a little bit before my time as far as following recruiting, but talking to Lou Emoji and my buddy Tony, and talking to getting to know a lot of the former Notre Dame players that played under Coach Holtz, and they'll tell you, like, man, Vinny recruited me. He recruited that guy. I mean, he was the guy that did a lot of the recruiting back then, and we're seeing Chad Bowden do a lot of that. Now, what I like about this staff is none of these guys are relying on Chad Bowden to do their recruiting for them. He is an assist. He is a guy that's doing it with them. And I think that is a big, big, big part of it. Irish for Life says, I am working on my father-in-law to watch this YouTube feed. Hi, Dad. Praying that you and Mom are feeling better. Yeah, we got to get him. A part of this channel, man. I'm going to hold you responsible for that. We definitely got to do that. And Connor said his her name is Brandy, so that is Connor's friend who is in a coma. So if y'all will keep Brandy and her family in your prayers, we would greatly appreciate that, and I certainly will as well. Get to a few more questions here. David Solomon says Al Washington is the reason that Sonny Styles is at Ohio State, not Notre Dame. He sure has brought his swag and recruiting prowess with him. That's factual, David. That's accurate. I actually had a conversation with a family member of Sonny Styles, and that's exactly what they said. He played a huge role. Now, obviously, I think Sonny liked Ohio State, but the recruitment of Al Washington, I mean, if we're being honest, he beat Marcus Freeman for Sonny Styles. I mean, Marcus Freeman hasn't lost many battles at Notre Dame. That is one he lost. And so if you can't beat him, join him, right? Or get them to join you. And that's kind of what they did with Al Washington. And I do believe he's recruiting a position that he's more comfortable coaching. I believe that, and recruiting. G Harden 370 with a super chat. Thank you very, very, very much. Sorry to be the Dante Moore guy. But can you prepare him to be the last? Can you compare him to the last 2 5-star QBs? Their name is landed, Dane Christ and Gunnar Keel, who left much to be desired. Number one, I did view Dane Christ as a 5-star. I did. He had a phenomenal skill set. Big, athletic, huge arm. I never thought Gunnar Keel. I actually wanted Matty Mock over Gunnar Keel, to be completely honest with you. I never thought Gunnar Keel was a 5-star quarterback. So I don't view him there. But as far as comparing them to two, I think that's a good question. And again, I don't mind talking about these type of things with Dante. I'm just not going to talk about his recruitment really anymore. But I think when you look at Dante compared to those guys, he's a more modern quarterback. Like those guys, like Dane Christ, was kind of coming up in that era where we were all still kind of looking for the 6'5", big, strong arm, guy could move in the pocket and all that kind of stuff that, there wasn't a throw on the field that he couldn't make. I mean, he had an absolute bazooka for an arm. And, I wouldn't call him like a runner by any stretch, but he was mobile enough to where he could move the chains and avoid pressure and all that. And I remember watching him at the Army All-American game. I was down there that week, and I mean, he just made some throws that just like, goodness gracious, like this kid is really, really, really impressive. And he just the thing about him, Dane was not super, super accurate, and he had a really long release, which I think got him in trouble at some times. And he just never seemed to pick up just really going through his progressions smoothly. So I think with Dane, that was a big part of it. And of course, he hurt his knee in 2010. He was playing, he had some good moments. I mean, the Michigan State game, I thought he made the touchdown pass he threw to Michael Floyd in that game was phenomenal. He threw the beautiful deep ball to Kyle Rudolph for the 90-plus yard touchdown that game. And I think the knee injury really hurt his confidence. And I think Brian Kelly and Charlie Molnar, especially Charlie Molnar, did a horrible, horrible job coaching him. Like, they were brutal to him. Charlie Molnar was one of the biggest a-holes I've ever met in my life. And the manner in which he treated players was really disgusting, to be completely honest with you. And unfortunately, Dane caught the brunt of that, and he didn't have the mental toughness to handle it the way that Tommy could. And that's the thing about Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees is a mentally tough kid. To deal with Charlie Molnar and Brian Kelly for 2 years, you've got to be a pretty mentally tough kid to be able to handle that. There is no doubt about that. But yeah, Dante. So I talked about them. Dante, to me, the other thing that separates Dante is more of a modern quarterback in that he throws off platform a lot more. Both of those guys had longer releases. They were tall. Dante's off platform. I think he does things off script a little bit better. His accuracy is way better than those other guys were. He doesn't have the big arm that they had. Those guys were both probably better runners than Dante was, although Dante could be a better runner if he wanted to, but he's more of a pure pocket passer. Dante doesn't have the cannon that Dane had, but he's got a faster release. He's far more accurate. And Dante's ability to process information is as good as any quarterback in this class or last year's class, in my opinion. I mean, it is elite. It is truly elite. And that's the other thing that really separates them from others. Michael Hahn with a great comment. I think this is really spot on, Michael. Michael says, when Penn State was elite in the 80s and 90s, they picked up all the great players from Maryland. It is a sleeper state for talent, always has been. I would add, Michael, that Joe Paterno also in that staff also did a great job of tapping into the Northern Virginia area as well. And they would kind of get Northern Virginia, Maryland, D.C., that DMV area. They would always be very successful there. And you are absolutely right. I mean, DJ Dozier was from Southern Virginia. If you remember him, he was their leading running back, and was it 86, right? When they beat Miami for the national championship, DJ Dozier was a guy from Virginia. So he obviously was a guy that was a really, really great player for Penn State, a really, really good player for Penn State on a championship team. He was a Virginia guy. So, yeah, that Virginia, Maryland, D.C. area was really good to them. Ohio State's had some success in that area recently. Bama went up and has had success there. They got the Kajando brothers. They got Terrell Hall out of that area. John Mechie was a Jersey kid, I believe. Or was John Mechie I always get this one confused. Was John Mechie he was a Jersey kid, right? Like, I keep forgetting if he was from New Jersey or from Maryland. I always get that one wrong. He was from New Jersey. Yeah, I thought so. So, like, that's the thing is, like, that Jersey down to north of Virginia, it just kind of all connects. I mean, when I was living in Virginia, my dad and my uncles we would kind of drive up the eastern shore of Virginia, hop on a ferry, take it into, southern Jersey. And, we'd drive into Delaware, get into southern Jersey, or take a ferry into southern Jersey, and we'd go to Atlantic City, So, I mean, you get that whole region. Notre Dame can start having more success there. There's definitely going to be some impact players coming to that region. And, Notre Dame needs to tap into that. Because the thing is, Michael, is what they have to do. And this is why I think Devan Houstan and Jason Moore are so important. Getting the Cam Harts and guys like that is so important. The Sam Mustafers is because the more success you can have in that Jersey, that East Coast Jersey down to North Carolina, the more you can tap into St. Louis, the more you can maybe steal a kid or two out of Texas, the more you can just own Chicago and get, when there is a big time player like a Dante Moore coming out of Detroit, being able to get those kids, it puts less and less pressure on you to have to get kids out of Florida and Louisiana and Georgia and states like that, where you're just not going to have as much success. Because if you look at, the states that produce the most NFL players, it's states that have big time in-state programs or are right in the middle of, like when you look at the Atlanta and Florida areas, they're right in the middle of SEC country. It's hard to go down there and consistently get a lot of big time players. And so you can still get them, but if you can take some of that burden off by getting the guys like that out of the North, it can be very, very impactful. So, and then obviously Devan Houstan is one of those kids. That's something that adds a lot of value to this pickup for Notre Dame and makes it an even bigger pickup. And if you can add Justin Moore on top of that, boy, it gets really, really, really good. So Keith Wiegand said that John Mechie played at St. James's Jr. So I knew there was some kind of Maryland connection. That's why I kept thinking he was there. So I appreciate you, Keith, you let me know about that. So everybody, that's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is going to be our only show for today. Sean is still on vacation, so he and I are going to kick back up our Saturday shows that we were doing there for a while together. But he's out in California right now, so he'll be back. We'll try to get back on track next Saturday. Make sure that you're back with us on Monday, obviously. But in the meantime, as Mace AK says, join the message board, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, leave a 5-star review if you can. And as always, go Irish. So everybody, have a phenomenal rest of your day. I hope it's as beautiful where you are as it here is in South Bend, Indiana. Gorgeous weather. I'm going to go hang outside for a little bit with my wife and my dogs and do a little bit of work from out there. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks for all the super chats. Thanks for the people that have been a part of our board. Big day today for Notre Dame. Huge pickup. Hope you all enjoy the show. Thank you so much for being a part of the Irish Breakdown podcast.